I fought and I battled to be where I am, and I couldn't have done it without the help of these amazing, I couldn't have done it without the help of these amazing women.
Welcome to another episode of Girls Know Nothing. The media has always bombarded us with images of perfect bodies and confusing messages when it comes to food, what is good for us and what is bad for us. Well, the next guest is, in my opinion, one of the most followed, if not the only qualified nutritionist content creator on Instagram and, a personal favourite of mine. Emily English is a qualified registered nutritionist with a degree from King's College London. And her passion began from an early age through her family of cooks and chefs. Emily's curiosity grew for both what was on her plate and what was going on inside our bodies. So welcome to the studio, Emily.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. Honestly, everyone has been so gassed at you of coming on my podcast because I feel like everyone I speak to is a massive fan of yours.
It's just grown exponentially at the moment, and I can't even leave the house now without meeting someone or seeing someone who knows my lasagna or knows my hot girl pizza, and it's amazing.
That's such a cool thing to be known for, though. I feel like you've dominated that market because there is nobody else out there that can make content the same way you do.
I never ever thought it was going to be my thing, though. So I've always loved food, and I never trained in content creation. I literally just picked up my phone one day, and I used to have my phone. I used to balance it in my cupboard with a cup of rice on top of it, so to stop it flopping over, and just record top down my chopping board. And I go back to my earliest reels and I howl at myself. But literally the whole journey I've just taught myself.
Literally, when I look at your content, I feel like there must be a whole camera crew, cameras behind everything you do because it looks so good.
It's literally me, my kitchen. I have a rollout marble plastic mat that I put down, my chopping board, 2 sets of lights, and then an overhead tripod with my phone. I do it all on my phone. I get quite a few people who message me thinking, what professional setup do you have?
Yeah.
What camera do you use? I'm the only thing that you need to content create is your iPhone.
That's literally insane because, like I said, it looks so good. But going back to your first kind of reels, what inspired you to actually go into nutrition in the first place?
So I had quite a turbulent process with food and relationship with food. And I remember as a young kid, I was always the really tiny, stick thin girl who I actually used to get bullied because people used to call me anorexic, and I used to do a lot of sports. So I competed in cross country, athletics, and food was just very much a fuel. I enjoyed it, and in my family situation, I was responsible for a lot of the cooking. So I'm one of 5, and my mum had three kids under the age of 3 when I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Wow.
So I suddenly had to become very independent because my mum wasn't able to look after me in the same way anymore. I mean, 3 kids under the age of 3, that is so much time. My dad had to work to grow his business all the time as well. And people have this impression of me sometimes that they think that I come from this kind of very silver spoon, well-to-do, privileged situation. But the reality is, I really came from nothing. I'm so proud of my dad because he went through a lot of his own issues to become a successful businessman that he is now. But at that time, things were hard, and food was something that was a bit of a stress. And I remember my mum doing the shop, and one day everything came and it was all budget mode, and there were no treats, no sweets, and she was like, I need you to make dinner. So from a very early age, I had to look into quite empty fridges and cupboards and stick something together. And this was where chili con carnes, casserole stews, all of those things were something that was bounced around my house quite often. Then I started to become a young woman. So age of 17, I was at V Festival one year, and I got a tap on my shoulder, and someone asked me if I wanted to come for a test shoot for ASOS. And this was all internal, all in-house at ASOS. And as a 17-year-old girl, I was like, what?
Any girl's dream, right?
What? I shopped at ASOS all the time, and I'd just come back from holiday as well, so I was super tanned, I was feeling myself, and I went and did this test shoot, and they booked me. And I had the best 1.5 years, 2 years at ASOS. They were an amazing community. They were an amazing support. I felt nurtured and safe and confident in that whole process. And never once did I ever feel conscious about my body or conscious about me kind of visually. And of course, there were other girls who had longer, shinier hair, and I was like, oh, my lips aren't as big as that. But it didn't really affect me. I didn't have it kind of internalize in a negative way. And then, of course, I was still growing and developing as a woman. And I started to become a little bit curvier, a little bit bigger. My thighs started to grow. I had the best summer of my life. I took my mum to Chicago. We had deep pan pizza. We went to the baseball game and had hot dogs and milkshakes and all the amazing life experiences that I'm so pleased that I got to have. And I came back, and the model bookers at ASOS decided that it would be a really good opportunity for me to get a modeling agency. So this is separate from anything to do with ASOS. And I got that agency, and they basically triggered something inside of me that suddenly I felt like I wasn't good enough looking the way that I was. They commented on my weight. They commented on my thighs. They'd just taken Polaroids of me and then call me into a room to critique me. And I've never been a person who is one of those girls who's like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Like, I do care. I'm sensitive. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't think I should have to change that thing about myself. But what they said and what they did to me, I don't know what it was, but it was like a switch that flicked inside my brain. And I remember coming home just in my mind on that train from London. And I walked into my house, and my mum was there, and she just put dinner in front of me. And I felt so much anger and resentment towards her at that point. And I looked at that plate, and I remember it was a chicken pie. And I said, I don't know why you feed me this. Like, I can't eat this anymore. I need to change. Like, I'm too big. I don't look like I should look. And I even remember that evening going out for a run. And that whole mindset of, I'm doing this because I need to get smaller. I need to shrink myself. I need to fit into this mold. I need approval. Because if I'm ever going to be looked at and I want people to look at me and think, oh, wow, like, you're great, then I need to be this certain way. And that's where I lost myself. And it was probably about 6 to 8 months of extreme restrictive eating. I was petrified of anyone else touching or feeding my food. I cooked everything myself. I became so obsessive. I weighed a spinach leaf. Like, I would literally weigh my spinach leaves, and I'd be there on my Fitness Pal. Like, my body was a mass equation, every single gram, every single ounce. And there was one defining day where it was summer, it was hot. I was really small at this point. I was not getting booked at ASOS anymore. People were concerned about me. And my mum cooked these cheese rolls for everyone. And everyone was just sitting down like a normal family with this cheese roll in front of them, a cup of tea, and they were just tucking in. And this is the first time I think that my mum pushed me a little bit. So she was like, here's a roll, eat it. And I literally had this nervous breakdown in my kitchen where I crumbled into a ball and I just sobbed. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't eat this roll. And I don't know why, because it's just a fucking cheese roll. And it was that moment that I just knew so deep down in myself that this wasn't who I was. This wasn't who I wanted. This wasn't who I wanted to be. Like, I didn't want to live my life as a prisoner to what I thought I should be and should look like. And I ended up finding an incredible therapist. Her name was Jane. She specialized in eating disorders. And I started that journey and just started to kind of break my way out of it. And I remember leaving the whole modeling industry behind. It was something that was a hard decision for me because I was very financially stable. I suddenly became very financially independent. And I had to turn around and say, none of this is worth it to me, because my health and my happiness actually is the most important thing. And it was at that point, like, I loved school. I was a bit of a science buff, so I loved biology and chemistry. And I swapped my degree to go and study nutrition, because as someone who has a very inquisitive, creative mind, what I was doing to myself made no sense.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a very kind of like, not a black and white thinker, but I like to understand and appreciate the reason for doing something. Yet I was doing this to my body with absolutely no knowledge of nutrition. I didn't learn a single thing about nutrition for my whole journey of school, which is actually really bonkers, because if you think how vulnerable we are as women to culture, diet culture, what we feel we should look like, and body image, why does no one talk about normalizing food? So I went to King's, got my BSc, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I think when you were talking about how do we not learn about food, I think my entire education on nutrition was a pie chart.
Yeah. The eat well plate. Yeah.
And it was like this amount of carbs, this amount of fruit and vegetables, and this amount of protein or dairy. And I was like, but, everybody's body's different. We all need different things. What about, when you break it down, it's not just macros, it's micronutrients as well. Yeah. And especially as women, I went to an all-girls school, and, different parts of your monthly cycle, you need different things in your body, or you need more or less.
Yeah.
But it is a very, very confusing place. And I think that, one thing you touched upon that I don't think a lot of people talk about, are too scared to talk about, is that skinny shaming is a thing.
Yeah.
I was a very petite kid before I started playing sports, and it's still hurtful. It's just as hurtful as fat shaming, but we think it's okay because you're slim.
Yeah. I remember there was one day that I was probably 16 or 17, and I was wearing these coated black jeans, skinny jeans, because they were all the rage. And I was walking through King's Cross, and this group of guys were going, anorexic, like from behind me. And this was before I'd even like touched base with any sort of like modeling. And I remember being so conscious, thinking, I don't have a bum, I don't have boobs. But the reality is, that was my body.
Yeah.
That was my body. I was healthy, I was eating, I was moving. And I think we all have this, like, sometimes we all get a little bit detached from ourselves, and we're so busy thinking about others and what we want and what we should look like, where the reality is, I always try and tell people, do it for you, compete with yourself, be the best version of yourself. And if that means moving in a way that feels good for you, then do it. If that means nourishing your body with the right foods that make you feel energized, then do it. But don't forget that you are you, and you don't need to be anyone else to find happiness in that.
It's actually disgusting to hear that people would shout that at you.
Yeah.
Especially grown adults, like
men.
Yeah, sometimes it's not okay, but sometimes you kind of expect it from teenagers and children, because they're immature, and it's just, you think it's funny at the time, you don't really realize the impact of what you're doing. But as a full grown adult, to say that to somebody is disgusting.
Yeah. And it's so funny, because I literally, like, I say the voice because I remember it so clearly.
Yeah.
And that was such an imprinting moment in my life, and it was on my body.
It must have been really confusing for you growing up as a teenager to be told by one group of society that you're too skinny, and then to go into modelling and be told that you're too big.
It was a whirlwind as well, because I'm such a people pleaser, and I think with the way that I grew up, I was always the person who wasn't quite good enough. I wasn't quite the best. I wasn't quite the fastest, the smartest. I wasn't the most pretty at school, and I wasn't the most popular, but I wasn't a super geek. And I never really felt like I had a place. So I was always searching for like a reason to be approved of and belong. And I think that manifested so hideously in me that when that situation with the agency did happen, I couldn't cope. Like I crumbled into, I lost myself. That rationale, that self-identity, like who am I and what do I want, that just went straight out the window. But I also remember at the time, like I grew up in that era where Instagram just started to be a thing. And I remember booty. And I remember being exposed to the first round of influencers who were perfectly curvy and posted all these bikini pictures, and just this constant bombardment of, you can't eat bread. Here is this gluten-free, fun-free, egg-free, everything free. And I remember making these recipes that were so wrapped up in diet culture.
Yeah.
And like, we're the same age, and so we got bombarded at the same time at the peak where nothing was controlled.
Yeah, I literally remember it's I've always been pretty much a healthy size 8 all of my life, and I remember seeing constant pictures of detox teas, and trying to force myself to drink a detox tea, knowing that it would make me projectile vomit, because I thought that's what I should do to make myself skinnier.
Can you believe that was normalized? Like, that was served. Every single influencer or day one influencer at the time was literally pushing. They were there with, I remember following this account called Top Skinny Girls.
Oh.
And it would just post pictures of girls with their bodies in different angles. And then there'll be like the booties in there. And it's just so toxic.
And I remember that like anorexic, like hashtags were around about
Pro Anna.
Yeah. And like inspo and stuff like that. And it actually, I think that for me was like a major wake up call, because I was never going in that direction, but I knew people that were.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like I really saw it on social media in that way that it really freaked me out. And I was like, wow, this is a really big issue. Because I was exercising the same way you were describing, to like as a form of control.
Yeah.
Not as a way to like move and feel good and think well about myself.
I think it's all about language, and it's all about mindset when you're doing these things. And that's what I try and really push out on my social media page. It's okay to have aesthetic goals. And I think there's this balance between obviously freedom and body positivity. But that's why I always say, like, don't do it to become anything other than the best version of you, and make sure that it's coming from that positive mindset. So if I have a really amazing, for example, so a couple of my best friends came down the other weekend. We had a Saturday lunch together. We probably had a little bit too much rosé. We had pasta in an Italian restaurant. We had just the best time. Then we went like out afterwards, a few more cocktails, a few more like snacks in the bar as well. And it was so amazing. And I woke up that Sunday, and of course I was a little bit hungover, but rather than thinking, okay, I feel guilty, I'm going to restrict myself and I'm going to go to the gym and burn this all off, I woke up and I was like, oh, do you know what? A little bit of movement is going to make me feel really refreshed and really good. It's really going to clear out all of that alcohol, and I'm probably going to have a really good leg workout. And I did. And I came home and I focused on getting in the right nutrition and getting in all the stuff that I know is going to make me feel good, because it's the perfect art of balance. And you can't have one without the other. But it's also okay to want to explore wellness and explore fitness and explore nutrition, but make sure that it's coming from a positive mindset and a positive place, not a place of self-loathing, of comparison to others, of restriction, of self-hate. Like, it's all about self-love.
So talking about language being really important, obviously we grew up with the Fitspo culture on Instagram. You touched on it a little bit. What was now looking back at it as a nutritionist, what is your opinion on the whole Fitspo culture?
It's difficult because not everyone is affected in a negative way.
Yeah.
So some people see something and not be affected by it. And some people will be able to calorie count and go on MyFitnessPal and it be so non-offensive and so normalized to them. And if they want a chocolate biscuit, they're going to have a chocolate biscuit and not feel guilty about it. I think it's up to us, and we have a responsibility to navigate what we are exposed to in our lives. We have the choice now, and we actually have the privilege of choice, that we choose who we follow, we choose what we see, we choose who we engage with. So if you don't like that, or if you don't like something that someone's putting out, just unfollow it. Like, you don't have to have that exposure every single day. And if you fill up your world and your social pages with things that inspire you and genuinely motivate you, your life and your wellness journey is going to be much happier place because we have those influencers out there nowadays. We're so lucky. We have so many incredible content creators who are out there being authentic and genuine and putting out incredible content that is really useful. Like if I want to grow my glutes and have a laugh about it, I'll follow Harriet Harper Fitness. If I want to just look at gym culture and laugh, like there are just so many fantastic fitness influencers that aren't always about, hey, here's my 28 slim down guide to prep for summer. It's more than that now. And I actually do think it was a short phase and it was something that we're both exposed to. But now I actually think we're really lucky that we have the choice of so many different journeys when it comes to fitness.
Yeah, I think it's really important to reiterate that element of choice that you were talking about, because a lot of the inspo girls that I follow now talk about things like during their luteal phase, how they can't do a pull-up.
Yeah.
And or like how they used to, like a different phase of the cycle. So it is really nice, but I think it's hard because even now with these people, you're still getting an influx of confusing messages in mainstream media about what is and isn't good for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes I sit there and I'm wondering, like, is what I'm eating good for me? Is this bad for me? Like, I think I even read once that drinking water was bad for you.
I mean, everything's going to kill you, apparently. And I always tell people, don't overcomplicate it. If you want to get into the nitty gritty of things and jump in an ice bath in the morning and practice Wim Hof breathing, 100% go for it. It's your body. It's your wellness journey. You can do that. But if you're finding that you're getting stressed and overwhelmed by it, just cut it back. Like, it's really, really simple. No food is good or bad. Everything in moderation. Try and have more of the good stuff that you actually know is good for you, like your veggies, your whole grains, your legumes and pulses, your extra virgin olive oil, your avocados, nuts and seeds, all the things that we just know categorically are good for you. But if you want dairy milk over 70% dark chocolate, the bar of dairy milk is not going to damage your health. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to harm you. It's not going to give you a million spots. But rather think of your overall patterns and behaviors throughout the week rather than just singular moments. And I think what happens is we get so obsessed that we narrow down our line of sight to every single decision we make. And that's where it gets really stressful and overwhelming, because then you're sitting in M&S looking for your meal deal and you're overanalyzing every single option, and it becomes this bombardment of information on what's right or wrong. Whereas if I think, okay, I'm going to meal prep a few of my lunches from Monday to Wednesday, I've got dinner out on that Thursday, and like it's all about the accumulation of habits and balance throughout the week. That is the most important thing, not just those micro decisions that we make every single day.
Is this mindset that you've got now something that you've learned from therapy, or has it mainly come from?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that's why there aren't actually that many nutritionists out there like me. I think a lot of nutritionists are very black and white, and they detach nutrition from the meal that's on our plate. And that's why you see a lot of nutritionists post, I have this bit here and this bit here, and that's the source of this, and blah, blah, blah. Where I like to encourage people to think about their food identity. What does food mean to them? What's their culture in food? And how can we make sure that we're getting in all of the good stuff that we know is essential and that we need, but in a very normalized way? I still want people to eat food. We don't eat nutrients. We eat pie. We eat a bowl of pasta. We eat lasagna, exactly. And it's like, how can we hybrid the world of nutrition and wellness with the world of delicious food? And that's the barrier that I think I've crossed. And I think that's why everything, like, it's growing so quickly, because I tell people, hey, I'm making lasagna, but it's a super greens lasagna, because I'm going to sneak loads of different veggies and fiber types and gut feeding prebiotics in there. And I'm not going to lecture you about it. I'm just going to tell you, like, here's the recipe, you make it, it's delicious, but it's also nourishing and good for you. And it makes you feel good because you feel like you're doing something good to your body, but it also makes you feel good because you're eating something that you actually enjoy. You don't sit there with something you're like, oh, I'm a wellness girl, and here I am eating something that I don't actually love, and all I really, really want right now is a hot Swedish meatball wrap from Pret. It's about finding the foods that you genuinely enjoy, but that are also good for you.
Yeah, I think it's it's like we first met at a wellness event, and even though you're a nutritionist, everyone automatically assumes that's food as opposed to like overall wellness when it comes to your lifestyle. I think the session you led, I still have the notebook at home, but it was like, you know, what other habits can you do that would benefit you outside of what you eat?
Yeah.
And I think people forget that additional stuff outside of wellness, because I didn't even take into consideration how my mental health impacted my cravings or what I felt like I needed nutritionally. And it's a really mature way you've taken about it to actually say, I need help, I need therapy.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was having conversations with friends and things about what finding a therapist is like. And I feel like not many people talk about like the relationship you can build with your therapist, or you need to build with your therapist, especially if you're letting them into something as vulnerable as an eating disorder.
Yeah.
What was that journey like for you?
So I've actually always been really lucky with my therapist. I've had 2 therapists in my life. My first therapist, Jane, we specialised obviously in the more eating disorder side of things. She'd actually suffered with her own eating disorder. So I felt like it was someone who understood me, because it's a very weird thing, because people are like, well, why can't you just eat it? Why are you bothered about being skinny? But it was so much more than that. It was this controlling, obsessive, like incredibly OCD, addictive style of eating. And we practiced a lot of CBT. And I remember just the first time I sat down in the room with her, I know when my therapist is right when I feel comfortable enough to cry. So I normally feel very uncomfortable crying in front of people that I don't know. I feel like I really close up and I go very insular, and I just don't really give a lot of myself. And the first session with Jane, I just crumbled, and I knew that it was a safe space in an area that I could express myself. And I've only recently started therapy again now. I've had a very incredible but turbulent time from when I went to uni to my life now. There's been so many huge things that have happened that I haven't really addressed, because I've always been the person ever since a little girl that I'm like, just get on with it. Head down, brush it under, like, you're fine, you're resilient. And I remember having a little wobble recently, actually, where I felt a little bit burnt out, and I felt really lost with who I was and what I wanted from my life. And I had all these incredible, amazing things happen to me with my career, with the social page, but like deep down, I really didn't feel very happy. I felt really unfulfilled. And I just went on Google and I had a flick around and I looked about who was local, because I wanted to see them in person. I personally like to see people face to face. I think it has quite a strong connection in that sense. I feel like I can share more, especially because I live so much of my life on the phone, on the laptop. I need that almost
Human connection.
Yeah. And I found someone who kind of looks like me, but a little bit older than me. She kind of looks like slightly like my mum. But I remember walking in, it probably took me 2 or 3 sessions until I cried. And as soon as I cried and I felt that break of almost where I just sank back a little bit into those sessions, I knew that she was the right person. But as you said, it's like a relationship. It's like a friendship. You don't meet every single person when you're out and about and think, wow, you're going to be my best friend.
Yeah. You
have to, deep down inside, if you feel like you're comfortable sharing your deepest, darkest insecurities and secrets, because the reality is that is the person you're going to do that with.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I've always explained it as like dating.
Yeah.
And people like think that if they meet somebody, like if they meet a therapist and they don't gel well with them, therapy's not for them. Therapy's for everyone. Anybody with a pulse can benefit from therapy. It's whether you are committed to your mental health as you should be in taking on that journey and meeting somebody. What would you say to somebody who is probably listening and think that they are struggling with their relationship with food, or like needing that element of control in their life?
Seek therapy, because you need someone who isn't too close to home. You need someone who truly can help you navigate and understand what you're feeling, who you really are, what you really want, and break free of, we used to call it the chimp, me and Jane, and it was like the chimp with the two symbols that would clash. And I learned to distinguish my own internal voice with the chimp's voice. So when I would look at something and that little voice in the back of your head would say, you shouldn't have that, or that's too much, or oh my goodness, how many calories is that? I would instantly think of the clashing chimp, and I would be able to identify that thought so vividly and be like, you are not my voice. You are another voice. You are the chimp speaking. Do I want that? Yes. And being able to filter through that negative inner self-talk is something that even to this day I still have to practice, because we are all vulnerable and we all have an inner critic. Some people's inner critics are just louder than others, but learning to understand that just because it's coming from your head doesn't mean it's your own voice.
I think it's one of those things. I think it's a massive step to kind of admit to yourself that, you know, what you're experiencing or what you're feeling and thinking isn't right. And it is a brave thing to come out and say something that you need help, but you aren't alone in it, and there are other people that have experienced it as well. So I think it is really important. What do you think 27-year-old you would say to that 17-year-old Emily?
It's funny because I do this quite a lot in therapy, where I talk to the younger version of me, and I always just say to her, you're brave, you're resilient, you're amazing, and you need to trust in yourself that you can do this journey. Because it's going to make me a little bit emotional, but no, it's okay. It's like a therapy session. I'm actually so proud of myself, because there's been so many things that have happened in my life that I almost I fought and I battled to be where I am and to be the person that I am. And I couldn't have done it without the help of these amazing, I couldn't have done it without the help of these amazing women who have guided me through myself and get therapy.
It's kind of nice as well, because I feel like it's a bit of a full circle moment. When I look at your social media, I find comfort in being able to eat what I want, but be good about it as well. And, you know, it's kind of nice that you're doing that for other people as well. Sorry, I didn't want to.
Oh my God, killed me. Do you have a tissue? You got me on a sensitive day. No. Clearly I feel comfortable enough to cry with you.
Do you know what it is?
Don't worry, it's fine. It will dry.
It's a really weird skill that I have. For some reason, people feel very comfortable in telling me a lot of things. Yeah. So people that I don't necessarily have a very close relationship with will tell me all sorts of stuff.
Oh my God, here you go. What, do you want to hear where my trauma came from?
To be fair, it's very, my management say it to me all the time. It's a very.
Are we
good,
streaming concealer lines? Stunning.
Good, don't worry. I know it is something that people say to me. That's a very weird thing that I draw from people.
You really do.
But yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
You could be a therapist.
Do you know what? If I ever decided that I wanted a career change, I actually think it would be something I would be good at. But I did put a question box on Instagram, and surprisingly, every single question was about hormonal eating and feeding. And I feel like there's always that stigma online when women, I saw a graph the other day about women's hormonal levels versus a man's hormonal levels, and men have up down for every single day, whereas women have all these hormones and they are all over the place, and I couldn't even remember all of them if I wanted to. And that stigma and shame about, when she's on a period, she just wants to eat loads of chocolate and stuff like that. And I think people want to understand a little bit more, how do they know what is right for their body at the right time of their hormonal cycle?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I tell people is that your hunger fluctuates with your cycle. And a lot of people have this almost resistance against, I feel really hungry today, but I shouldn't eat. On the run up to your period, your metabolism increases to the point where you need to include an extra snack in your day, or you need to have slightly larger portions, because your body needs that extra fuel to kind of gear you up for your period. And I think being in sync and being aware of how your hormones affect things like your appetite and your cravings can really help just demystify why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. And intuitive eating is a funny area because I think it can be very confusing for a lot of people. A lot of people say, I want to be intuitive, but I inhale a pack of digestive biscuits because I can't stop eating them. Yeah. So it's a balance between educating yourself about your female body, when your appetite is going to be at its greatest, how to work out and what types of workouts to do around your cycle. And I feel that just gives a little bit more empowerment for yourself and honoring your hunger, making sure you're getting in the right nutrition and nutrients around your cycle. But if you find that's another layer of additional something that's just going to stress you out, then just focus on the balanced eating front. And if you are a little bit more hungry, include an extra snack. Like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to understand your hormones and your nutrition and your fitness. You can still be healthy, but just doing it on like a more general front. But if it is something that interests you, it's actually a really, really fascinating area for females, and it does make a big difference. It is something that you can have an impact for when it comes to your wellness. And it's great to actually see a lot of people talking about it nowadays, because so much of research and evidence is based on men. And a lot of the female side of things, like, it's never really published in a lot of peer-reviewed studies because it's so much more complicated, and we don't often see the results and the kind of definitive outcomes from studies as we do in men compared to females.
Yeah, it's like I 18 months ago removed myself from hormonal contraception, which meant that I had to force myself to learn about my cycle. But it wasn't until I started following certain accounts on social media that I actually realised it could impact hunger, your ability to work out, and what types of workouts you should do. Like, I used to remember getting so angry that I couldn't do what I could do last week.
Yeah.
Why can't I do it? And I would get upset and visibly emotional at the gym, and then all these men around me would be like, this girl's crazy. But it's one of those things that, like you said, it's interesting for me, but you know, your body's very good at telling you what it needs.
100%. And it's one of those things as well. It's as soon as you relax into trusting yourself and trusting your body, everything becomes so much simpler. And I think so much of what goes wrong when we get confused and we get stressed is because we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our body to eat what it needs, know when to stop, understand its hunger cues, and not trusting yourself. I mean, that's horrible. Like, that is not a position that you want to be in. So
kind of insulting to your own brain, isn't it?
100%. And that's why, like, don't get wrapped up in that negative self-talk. Don't get wrapped up in thinking that the chimp's voice is your own. And don't get wrapped up in just this comparison for wanting to be someone else. Like, you are amazing. You deserve the best. And you deserve to be nourished, thriving, and feeling energized, but also having the freedom to actually do what you want to do. Like, you have one life and you live in one head. So make it a nice place to live.
No, exactly. And if you ever need nice food inspo, because I used to get so sick of looking at boiled chicken, brown rice and broccoli, and I was so glad to see colourful food on my Instagram homepage every time you post something on there. I wanted to ask you, what would you say to people that, you know, all those people that made comments about your body, what would you say to them if you could say something to them now? If
you wouldn't say it to someone that you really loved, like your daughter or your mum, don't say it. Like, you do not deserve to comment on anyone else's body in a negative way to fit your own ideals of what you think that person should look like, because they're free to do whatever the hell they want with their own body.
And I think that's the amazing part about everybody's bodies being so diverse. If everybody looked the same, it'd be a very boring planet. We need to remember that. And like, I think it's one of the nicest messages I think I've taken away from this episode is that, you know, to learn to trust yourself, learn to trust what your body's telling you, and that it is okay if you need a break or you need to eat more or you feel like you need to go out and enjoy yourself. I'm really sorry that I made you cry.
No, it's great. It was near the end anyway, so we're not doing too bad.
But no, honestly, thank you so much. You know what? Thank you so much for everything you post. I know it's just out of your enjoyment and you fell into it by accident, but I really enjoy it. I've learned so much from you, and I wish you were there when I was a teenager because I would have benefited so much from that. But thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you for having me.
When I could hear it, I was like, no. I was like, I feel so bad because I hate making people.
Normally I don't crack.